All right, so believe it or not, this is a fish, this seahorse. It is very derived. You can see its body form doesn't look like your typical fish, but still it has the characteristics that fish have. So we're going to be talking about different species of fish, and usually when we talk about species of fish, it's okay to use the plural fishes. All right, so fishes, if we classify them, they are a group that is what we would say paraphyletic. What that means is we don't include all the descendants of fish when we talk about fish. So it's a number of these groups which have fish-like ancestors. But when you look at these other ones, such as terrestrial organisms, they also have fish-like ancestors which came from the sea. But we aren't talking about them when we're talking about fishes. So of the 24,000 known species of fish, more than half of them are marine. Quite a bit are freshwater, which is a little remarkable because there's not a lot of fresh water compared to marine water. But still, there are more in the marine environment than the freshwater. Marine fish are vertebrates, meaning they have a backbone, and are also chordates, which we studied a little bit about with invertebrates. But they can have variable types of skeletons, so they can be cartilaginous or they can have bony. They're the largest group of vertebrates in terms of species and abundance. And we mentioned some other vertebrate groups, including mammals and birds and salamanders and frogs. All those are vertebrate groups as well. So about half of all the vertebrate species are fish, so very diverse. So of the 24,000 fish species, how many are marine? That'll be your first quiz question. All right, so here are some of the groups which we have. The first is the most simplest form. They're called agnathans, and they do not have jaws. They do not have mandibles. And they include the hagfish and the lampreys. Then you have those with cartilaginous skeletons, which would be chondrichthyes, and osteichthyes, which is bony fish. So we'll go through these individually, starting with our agnathans. So there are two groups, two types, which belong to agnathans. Hagfish, which are just look like eels, and they can secrete a slime, which is very slimy as a kind of a defense. They're generally scavengers, live in the bottom of the sea and eat dead and dying stuff. Lampreys, on the other hand, are parasites, and that's what you see here on the right. They have an oral sucker and this large mouth full of teeth, which it uses to suck the blood or skin or whatever of its host. Both of them have these long cylindrical bodies, kind of like snakes or eels, and they do not, however, have fins like our other fish do. All right, so which type of jawless fish would you find attached to another fish or would be a parasite? All right, so the other fish, so ignoring our agnathans, are considered to be more advanced. They have a lot more derived characters in their morphology, including very efficient gills for extracting oxygen out of the water, scales that cover the body, a streamlined body, now that can vary, but generally streamlined, paired fins, so right and left fins, and a wide variety of jaw and feeding types, and then other sensory organs which help them in their environment, including the lateral line. Chondrichthyes then is the first group of fish that we're going to talk about, and they have cartilaginous skeletons. So you can see this on the bottom right. This is called the chondrocranium. This would be the equivalent of their skull. It's just not made of bone. It's made of cartilage. They have movable jaws. So the only bony parts of their whole body are teeth. So they do have bony teeth, and you can find shark teeth sometimes in the ocean. But the rest of their body, does not preserve well. They have a specific type of scales called placoid, and they have 5 to 7 gill slits, which open directly into the water. And they have a hole called a spiracle, which allows them to have water pass over their gills without having to open their mouth. And then the males have these structures near their anal slit called a clasper, and the females do not. And that's used in internal fertilization. All right, so sharks are one of the Chondrichthyes groups. Most shark species are decreasing in number due to hunting for their fins. This has a lot of visibility as of late, but still continues to be a problem. They have electrical ability or ability to sense electrical signals through an organ called the organ of Lorenzini, which is generally on the front of their head near their nose. They have 2 dorsal fins. The dorsal would be the equivalent of your back on a shark. So you can see they have 2 of those. The big, larger one is the one that we typically associate with sharks coming out of the water as they're about to eat us. They have variable birth, including oviparous, viviparous, and ovoviparous, and we'll go over those in a minute. And most of them are carnivorous. However, the largest of them, the whale shark, is actually a filter feeder and eats plankton. All right, rays are also cartilaginous fishes. They generally stay on the bottom, are benthic or demersal and partially covered in sand. And they go along the bottom of the sea looking for things to eat, such as crustaceans and mollusks. They also give live birth. That's just what viviparous means. They also have the 5 gill slits, 5 pairs of gill slits and a spiracle. They have these long whip-like tails. Some of them can be venomous. So it says poison gland, but it should say venomous. And some of them are even specialized to electrocute their prey. So there are some electric rays that can shock you. All right, so how many dorsal fins do sharks have? All right, bony fish, Osteichthyes then is our most diverse group, has 23,000 species worldwide. They have gills used for respiration and hinged jaws, a homocircle tail, which means a tail that is basically one big fan, whereas sharks have a heterocircle tail mostly. They have a lateral line, they have a swim bladder, and variable body shapes. Now they have lots of different coloration, which they use for adaptations in their environment, including counter shading, which we've talked about before, dark on top, light on bottom. They can be camouflaged with cryptic coloration. I saw that seahorse we had coloration which looked very similar to the vegetation where it lives. And sometimes they'll have disruptive coloration, which seems to break up their body form, so it kind of makes them camouflage. You can see that with this fish on the bottom right. And or very bright colors, which would be a warning coloration. Generally, those are going to be poisonous types of fishes. There's lots of different body shapes and body types depending on what kind of organism they are. Tuna is going to be a predator. All right, so you can tell this tuna, it has a very streamlined body shape. It'd be a very fast swimmer. There's some other things you can tell about it which would indicate that it's fast, which we've discussed in class. And the body forms are going to, of course, correlate with their life strategies, essentially, right? Your flatfish is going to be on the ground, on the benthos, moving around there. The snipe eel, that's going to be able to go in and out of very small places. Your porcupine fish is going to be able to blow itself up as a defense. And so there's lots of different then types of body shapes which correlate with their ability to adapt to their environment. There's lots of different ways that they can swim as well. As you can see, all these different types of body movements. Essentially, however, they need to make a thrust forward. In order to do that, they essentially wag back and forth, left to right. Sharks have the ability or requirement to, in order to get lift, they have to move forward. So that the only way they can go up is by moving forward. They can't just swim straight up. They also have things helping with buoyancy, such as the swim bladder, and their muscle pattern is in diagonal, kind of almost perpendicular, but really actually a bunch of parallel angles to each other called myomeres. And those go across the body, and that's what they use then to move their body to the left and right to propel themselves forward. All right, their gills are very important because that's obviously how they breathe, how they get oxygen. They are very efficient, so they have a cross-current, counter-current exchange system where blood and water pass by each other, and it's very efficient for pulling all the oxygen they can out of the water, which is necessary because there's not a lot of oxygen in water compared to in the terrestrial environments. Their structure of their gills is the rakers are on the front part, which is more of a bony part, and then the filaments are behind or towards the tail, which are going to have then those structures which exchange with the water in between them. Now, they also don't function outside of water. So water actually allows them to separate from each other and to work at extracting oxygen. If you take them out in the land, the gravity makes them all squished together, and so they aren't able to get air, even though there's lots of oxygen in air compared to water. Another indicator of the diversity of species is mouth shape and or location. So there are fish that have beaks, which are for mostly scraping things. They have long bills for extracting, getting in, and finding an organism that is otherwise hidden. There's sharp teeth and wide mouth for predators. If the mouth is forward in front of them, they're generally a predator, whereas if it's below them, like you can see in this ratfish, they're generally going to be a bottom feeder. So anyway, there's a figure from your book with showing a bunch of these different types. There's a long bill on the six-spine butterfly fish. The parrotfish has looks like a parrot because it has these crushing mandibles in the front for eating coral. And of course, the barracuda is going to be a predator. All right, so when we look at this, what can you tell me about this fish based on its body pattern and mouth structure? Pretty crazy looking fish. All right, for acquiring and processing food, the digestive system is very complete, much like a human's, which has a large stomach and then intestines, a long tract for acquiring or absorbing as much food as possible as it comes through. It has both mechanical and chemical digestion. Mechanical would be like breaking it apart. Chemical would be enzymes chemically breaking it apart. Carnivorous fish, just like carnivorous land animals, have a short digestive system, whereas herbivorous fish have a long digestive system because they need to get as much nutrients as possible out of their less nutritious food. The circulatory system of fish is basically one big circle, and the heart sits in the middle. And it's a two-chambered heart, so you have blood coming in and then being pumped to the gills. And then from the gills, it goes to the rest of the body where it is needed, so it's oxygenated at that point. And then from the rest of the body, then it comes back to the heart to be pumped again to the gills. And the gills then release carbon dioxide and take in oxygen. All right, so which of these is the following correct circulation for fish? All right, after this question, we will be done with lecture 1, and then after this, we'll do lecture 2 stuff. So osmoregulation, we've talked about this a few times before. Cartilaginous fish, as you can see from this figure, have a lot of things in their blood which bring the salinity up, and they have a salinity of their blood of about 35 parts per milliliter, which we know is about the same as seawater. So they would be osmoconformers. Whereas look at this other bony fish, and its blood is 14 parts per thousand. When compared to seawater, then it has to get rid of the salt. So it does that by excreting salt through the chloride cells of the gills and also excreting it out of their urine. All right, which of these is true and which of these is false? We'll answer that as a quiz question. All right, the nervous system, they have a bunch of adaptations to help them in their marine environment. So they have a brain, spinal cord, and nerves which go to all the different parts of their body, which is not always true of many of the invertebrates that we studied. They have taste buds to help them determine what type of prey are preferable, and also to help them smell, essentially, with their mouth. They have generally eyes that are large to let in light so they can see where they need to go, including a nictitating membrane, which glosses over their eyes when they're feeding so they don't get poked in the eye by their fish that they're trying to eat or whatever they're trying to eat. The lateral line system, so there's a figure of that here, basically has these openings where water can flush in, and then these little sensory organs, kind of like little hairs. So it's kind of like how if you blow on your arm, you can feel which way that air is coming that way because you have little nerve endings on the end of your hairs. Well, similar to these little hair-like structures in the lateral line, when the water moves, it moves the hairs and it sends a signal to their brain, letting them know, all right, there's movement on this side. They also have organs of Lorenzini or ampullae of Lorenzini. You can see that in the left here. These detect electrical currents, and everything that is alive, well, most animals emit some sort of electrical current as they use their nervous system. So this helps them to detect things that they might want to eat. All right. So which sensory organ can fish use to sense movement in the water? All right, other behaviors, schooling, we talked about this a little bit as a predatory defense. So it can make predators harder for them to single out a certain fish that they want to eat. It can also collectively make smaller fish look bigger and more formidable. And so many fish, as a protective mechanism, will school as juveniles, but a lot of them also do it as adults. Okay, mating behaviors, territorial behaviors. These can be exhibited all the time, right? If there are very competitive species and they have resources they are defending from other organisms, so they can be very territorial, or they can just be territorial just during reproduction, where they would posture and defend their territory and or attract mate. And these generally, however, don't result in fights because fighting is actually a great cost and can lead to injury and death. And so generally they kind of just posture until one of them decides it's not worth it and walks away. But you can see also in the bottom right here, there are many courtship behaviors. These are a couple of, these are actually freshwater fish, but fish do sometimes have very elaborate mating dances or requirements before they can mate. All right, there is also migration in fish. So two examples we have here. fish that migrate from and between seawater, marine environments, and freshwater. So eels, freshwater eels, are kind of interesting because they actually live most of their life in the freshwater, and then they go out to sea to mate. There are two populations from Europe and North America which meet at one location in the middle of the Atlantic. And that is called catadromous. But you might be more familiar with salmon, which are anadromous. They live most of their life in the ocean and then go to the freshwater to spawn. So freshwater eels are blank and eels are blank. All right, we talked about the some mating behaviors and rituals that fish have. Generally, these are controlled by the hormones in their body, which is also released in their body based on water temperature, day length, and tide cycles, and so they can have a seasonality to their reproductive cycles. Broadcast spawning is the most common thing, but some fish do have internal fertilization and or live birth. Fish can be also variable in their sex throughout their life. So you can have simultaneous hermaphrodites where they have both ability to produce sperm and egg, which is rare. More common is sequential hermaphrodites where they change sex from one to the other. So protandry is where males develop into females, and protogyny is females developing into males. So generally there's something in the environment which cues them to change, and generally it's a social structure. So the largest one is female or male, and all the other ones are the opposite sex. And then when that one dies, the largest one becomes that sex. All right, fish species forms groups with one large female and a bunch of smaller males, is what that's supposed to say. So one large female and a bunch of smaller males. If this fish exhibits sequential hermaphroditism, what type is it? So the largest one is a female. So is this protandry or protogyny? All right, we did mention we were going to talk about these three types of birthing. So viviparous means live birth, and that's what sharks do, and some other fish do this too. You can see this on the right. There's a baby shark being born. All right, you can also be oviparous. That's just where you release eggs into your environment, external. And then there's a kind of a mixture of this called ovoviparous, where the eggs are internal and they are fertilized internally, and then they develop as eggs inside the body, but then when they are ready to hatch, it's like live birth. So it's kind of a combination where the eggs are retained inside the body, but at the end there's live birth. All right, so what is the birthing strategy of these three? We have a guppy. You can see the little fish coming out there. We have this, I don't know what type of fish this is, but it's giving birth to smaller baby fish. And a seahorse, which is also, this is actually a male, which holds the babies, and out they come once they are ready. All right, this is just a figure of a shark. You can see the claspers there, which the males have. And here are some schooling fish. Another advantage of schooling is, especially if you're really silvery, like these, I think anchovies, it can reflect the light and confuse predators. All right, here's all the groups that we talked about. Actually, we didn't talk about coelacanths. They are lobe-finned fishes. And that's it.